Yeah.
Hi everyone. Welcome to today's interview. It's one in the Enlighten Up series, where I basically ask my questions to people that I find inspiring or interesting for whatever purpose. And today I want to introduce you to Frank Marrero. Frank Marrero, I have looked some things up about you. You seem to be a very diverse person. Like you wrote a book on Socrates, a book on like an entire school curriculum
Mm-hmm.
for kids.
I was a school teacher.
Yeah.
Big
but-
philosophy for little kids. So the Socrates, there's a similarity there
Oh, they merge.
in some sense.
Oh, I see. And I don't know if this one merges. The therapeutic fasting book.
I have a book on fasting.
Yeah.
About the recent medical revelations,
Yeah.
discoveries.
And one on etymology.
A book on illuminations in etymology.
Yes.
Yes.
A book on Western history.
Yes, the view from Delphi, an ecstatic appreciation of Western history.
And I also saw one about Adida.
My book of leelas or stories about my time with Adida.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
How and is it true that you also ran a restaurant?
Yes, it was my book on my airplane flyer. I wrote a biography of an aviator.
Ah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Book. There's other books, but that's good enough for now. Those are the main ones.
And,
yes.
and you ran a restaurant?
I was in 1976. I was a raw foodist, and I was such a foodie that there was no place I could go out to eat.
As a raw foodie.
I was such a snob about really good food.
Uh-huh.
That I decided to open a restaurant so I could have a place to go out to eat. It was entirely selfish.
Your raw food restaurant.
Yeah, well, it wasn't raw food, but there was plenty of good things to eat there. Yes, and I was mainly raw. I would, pretty much mostly yes, but I didn't do it myself. I owned a hardware store, and owned and ran a hardware store, but I knew what I wanted, and so I found somebody to be a cook and run it, and we tried things out, and I was director at least, and but I never cooked a single thing there.
Okay, you're not the cook.
No.
And you had a hardware store too?
I owned a hardware store, yes.
Sounds diverse.
Yes, diverse.
Multi-passionate, as they would say.
Yeah.
Today. That's very hip.
Yes. And before that, I opened a restaurant because I lived in the Appalachia, which is a rural area of Tennessee, for a while,
Mm-hmm.
on a farm with no electricity and no running water for 2.5 years, and which farms center around food 24 hours a day, and so shoveled a lot of manure,
Uh-huh.
and then learned to cook. And learned what really fresh, rustic country food, how good it could be.
Yeah.
So, it's that was kind of but I always say that the ashram of Adida is the greatest education I ever got. But of all the other kinds of education I've ever gotten, living on a farm was hands down.
Second?
Oh, there's not a close third.
Oh yeah, you learn a lot there.
Well, there's no stores, there's no days of the week. There's no money. You want something done? There's rocks over there. There's a tree over there. You have an axe. You have a rope.
Mm.
Make whatever you want. And so you have to, talk about creative. A MacGyver. You make up everything, and sometimes you go hungry, and sometimes you feast. So but you're always shoveling shit. So that was perfect preparation for spiritual life.
Okay. Yeah, because on your in your YouTube channel, I saw as a description, devoted to the Nectar's company of Adida Samraj.
Oh, devoted to the Nectar's company of Adida, yes. I
Okay.
am.
So, what age did you come across him? After you
Yes.
came from the
After I came from Jollity Farm.
What age were you?
I was 23 when I left Jollity, and just turned 23. I left Jollity and moved to Nashville, Tennessee, my hometown. And after about a year, I had the restaurant and had the hardware store. And we opened the restaurant on January 17th, 1977. The Laughing Man was called.
What? Seriously?
Yeah, absolutely.
Accidentally?
No, not accidentally,
Oh, okay.
because we had run into Adida by then, and
In 77?
in 76.
6.
In
Okay.
76, and so I was anyway. I was, I'd studied philosophy and linguistics and the prophet Alan Watts' level of spirituality, and some better stuff, some Heidegger, some Benjamin Lee Whorf linguistics, this and that level of things. But Heidegger was pretty heavy duty, and then I ran into this Bubba Friedjohn at the time.
Where? How?
Someone gave me a book because they knew that I was a high-class or low-class bullshitter about all that. And so they said, I don't understand this one. So, no problem, sweetheart. I'll give you my opinion. Just let me read it and I'll let you know. Total ego asshole. And I read Garbage and the Goddess, and it was both more brilliant than I'd ever read. Shocking. But there was stuff about it that I didn't understand or like. Particularly when he would claim that he was God. Okay. But then I would give him the benefit of the doubt, so to speak, because the things that I did understand were more brilliant than anything I'd ever read. But then he would say, God realization, the ecstatic exclamation, it's not a proclamation, it's the exclamation of God realization, is utterly unacceptable unless you understand what's being said. It's like, you take the one that's so offensive to the mythically said when people repeat Jesus as I am the way, the truth, and the light, right? Mm-hmm. If you take that at face value because God said it, then you all have to be Christians, right? But it's an ecstatic statement, it's an exclamation, not a proclamation. And so to understand ecstatic speech is very difficult. So how do you do that? You see the truth of it. And when you see the truth of it, you and I also are the way, the truth, and the light. But that's when we realize the truth of it. It's a universal exclamation, ecstatic.
So you felt that when you read that book, The Garbage and the Goddess?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
No, and I was quite perplexed because proclamations of divinity were... I really appreciated philosophers going, well, you need to understand that blah, 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 blah. That level of higher thought, so to speak, at least ego-fed higher thought, I appreciated, liked, consoled myself with, glorified myself with. And, but this, the ecstatic exclamations of self-divine realization, I did not understand.
Was it the first time that you read something like that?
Yeah, so loudly, yes. So loud, and in such modern. He has a master's degree. He has degrees from Columbia and Stanford. His English is it's the greatest, greater than Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. He's exquisite in his language. Mm-hmm. So it's not some translated thing from a distant past. It's quite so anyway, I had trouble with it at first, For 3.5 years I did, but it was
For that one book.
well, no. Then the woman came to me. She says, "Well, what did you think about the book?" I said, "Well, I'm gonna have to read these other 2 books they mentioned before I really give you my opinion."
And then what did you read?
I read the only other 2 books there were:
Which were?
The Method of the Citizen and The Knee of Listening. And my
Okay.
intimate at the time, we ordered them and we swapped them. And she read The Knee of Listening and I read The Method of the Citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day she sat up and just bolted upright and went, "I just want you to know I'm ready to move to California whenever you are." And I went, "Oh, we don't need to do that. It says right here, serve where you are. The divine is everywhere." Because I was a wealthy young man. And I was not interested in leaving my wealth and the sphere of influence that I had, and the way people thought so well about me, and all that. And so she said, "Oh, no problem. Just letting you know I'm ready if you ever." I said, "What happened?" She says, "Well, I was reading Beloved's inquiry, Avoiding Relationship."
Oh.
That's the inquiry. That was the practice at the
Avoiding
time.
relationship.
The practice was avoiding relationship. It's a inquiry of yourself, by yourself. Well, you could write volumes about the implications of it. And it starts off, of course, as he says, in very simple terms: Am I avoiding you? Am I avoiding the doorknob? Am I avoiding my mother, my father, the sky? What you can go on like that, but that's not really the full extent of it. It's not specific. In other words, it may be specific, and it certainly is, but it's also omnidirectional.
Mm.
When you are utterly utterly connected to everything in all directions, that's the other side. That's when that could be answered. No, I'm not. Except every I is the avoidance of it. So it's a paradox. It leads ultimately to a realization is a paradox. As Beloved says, there's no I left over to enjoy enlightenment.
Mm.
So that's why it's not in the form, am I avoiding a relationship? Because I dissolves in utter turning out into the unity of existence. So she got it, and I didn't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And then she knew that after I read enough of this God man, that I would eventually go, oh, I see what you mean, and
then go.
Be ready to go.
Okay. Did that happen?
I was kind of not really. Well, not exactly. I came out for my second trip to California. That's where the main scene was at the time. The first time we visited, Beloved was in Hawaii, and we didn't get to see him, but we saw everybody in the community, integrated into the community for almost a month, and then we kept reading, and then someone showed up at my door with every magazine, every tape that had ever been published. One day he said, "I can't handle this anymore, please take it." Jimbo Walsh. And so we just went into it heavy duty, and then we decided that between right after Thanksgiving and right before Christmas, there was usually a lull in our business. I said, let's go to California. So we bought our ticket and we'll visit again. And so we bought our tickets and had the dates all set, got our tickets in the mail, and then we got an invitation in the mail to come sit with Bubba. And it was on the day that we'd already bought our tickets for.
Mm. Okay.
That was good.
Okay.
That was a good one. And then by this time I had been showing the movie Laughter and spreading Beloved's books around to all my friends. And
before you saw him?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
you were already that convinced?
Oh gosh, the teaching is brilliant.
Okay.
And fun in a free kind of a way, not fun in an egoic kind of a way. It's just the level of enjoyment is so extreme. That it outshines, as he says, enjoyment is the foundation of the fulfillment of the law. You don't give yourself to God because you're going to be good. You give it to what is the greatest enjoyment, and it is heart enjoyment, not mind or body enjoyment. And so
So sitting. So you were invited to sit with him. What does that mean?
we would there would be an occasion where he would respond to questions.
Okay.
And,
You would
and
physically sit with him or in front of him?
there was a big room with 300 people in it.
Oh, okay.
And I was invited to be, Denise and I, and some of my other friends at this time who are also responding to the Dharma or the teaching.
And how long had he already been active?
This was, he started he started the ashram in 72. This was 77, 5 years.
Okay.
This is 5th year of his teaching work.
I see.
And so he sat there and I watched him like a hawk for 3 hours, just like, who is this guy saying he's God? How does he get off? Is he gonna flirt with anybody? Is he gonna like say, oh yeah, I said that?
Are you suspicious?
Totally.
Yeah.
I don't believe anybody. Anybody that says I'm God, if somebody says they're God, realize that you should be, your doubt bullshit radar should be on high alert. Period.
But you were also spreading all his books, so.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean you're not careful. You go, I expect this is the most brilliant thing this is. There's part of it I don't understand, but this is brilliant, and I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
But now I was going to see him, and you can write good shit. I've written some books. Sounds great. Am I enlightened? Not like that,
Mm-hmm.
and not like that claim or exclamation. So I was watching him with very severe doubting. Like, where is he getting off? Where is he getting off? Where is he getting off? And I saw only service for 3 hours. He only served. Later I got to spend 5 months in a very small room with him, and it was the same thing. I never saw not a nanosecond of attention for himself. He was always only serving. It was breathtaking.
So how can you tell? What
Well,
does it
you know
look
how it
like?
is. Well, if you gave me a compliment, I'd go, oh, thank you very much, kind of a thing. But I would go, he would just defer it back. Oh, well, that's good that you see that. And it was, he never took it for himself, and in that sense.
Mm.
And he never, when he would say something that was funny and people would laugh, he would never like go,
My
maybe.
joke.
Yeah, or if he did, he would do it so he'd make fun of people that expected that. He was always only serving.
Okay. You could tell that from the...
You could tell that from watching him. I was watching him like, checking him out.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to find something bad wrong. And up close. And I only saw service. I only saw loving, humorous, enlightened service. But I also thought, like, if he's God, I'm going to feel like, and I didn't.
Okay.
And I
You were expecting something.
Absolutely. I was, if fucking guy says he's God, I'm going to go, okay, hit it, baby. And, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't feel that at all. I felt like I had gotten an invitation to infinity.
Infinity.
I felt
that
like
sounds pretty...
That was pretty great, but I didn't get taken to infinity. I just got an invitation.
Okay.
I thought I'd be blasted into some kind of groovy light shit or something.
Yeah.
And I'd done enough drugs to know there was other dimensions, and so I thought there would be something other than somebody who was just serving, who was enlighteningly brilliant. But that's all I saw.
Just the service.
Enlightened, truly, just brilliantly enlightened service. Only service, not like I said, there wasn't a nanosecond of, and so I was very impressed.
Okay.
And then after the sitting, there was dinner stuff, sat down to all the people who had seen him for the first time, and all my friends went, we're giving up our entire life, we're moving here, okay?
And you?
I was like, huh? And so I went, what about you, Frank? And I went, I had a hardware store, a restaurant, making gobs of money. I bought an old church built in 1910, old classic country church in the country. Big place, giant church, an old country church. And I renovated it. That's where I lived. My intimate drove a Mercedes. We were living high on the hog, as they say. And,
okay.
I had zero interest in giving all that up. And so, but then there was that moment, and I went, it's really the time to weigh a privileged life against eternal life.
Oh, you felt it was like that, like there was an eternal life before you.
It seemed that way. I wasn't sure.
Okay.
But it was a good enough bet, and I made so much money so easily, I thought, I can do that anytime, anywhere.
Making money.
Oh, yeah. And so, and the other interesting thing was that as soon as his eyes saw mine, I knew all karma had just been taken away from me. And I thought, damn, I've got so much good karma. Because everything I touched turned to gold. All my businesses, everything I tried, just went like Midas Touch, and it was all gone.
After
I saw him,
you felt...
I saw him, and he looked at me. I went, my karmas have all been erased.
But your karma was that it was going well?
Well, I had some, I was full of shit in many ways. That all went away. And also my good ability to have the Midas touch went away.
Okay.
And then reality was suddenly leveled to my own actions, the karmas and even the karma and grace level of would be what I created instead of the karmas I inherited. And I had a golden boy childhood in some sense of very bright in some ways, and I was capitalizing on all that kind of energy and used all the smarty pants coins that I'd ever cashed in. And I had a head of steam. I'd have been super wealthy in 3 or 4 more years,
Mm-hmm.
and 5 or 6 or something, and so I had a head of steam, and that was all gone.
Okay.
It was really.
It vanished.
It just, I could tell something had just, it had been erased. It was just, it was subtle. I noticed thinking it just for a thought. It wasn't like, it wasn't any big wowie zowie, but I noticed. I was like, everything's gone. Wow.
With the exchange of a look?
With the change of a look.
Well, you were not formally associated.
No, I wasn't even very convinced.
Oh.
I was still looking at him like, what do you mean, your God? And so.
Okay. That was a rather big impact then, of just one sitting.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. It was subtle, but I did remember the thought.
Okay.
And then so I sold everything I owned and moved to California, across the country.
You went for it.
Oh, absolutely.
With your intimate.
With my intimate.
Oh.
She was ready to go 8 months before that.
Yeah.
And so, so we arrived, and I still had some money left, and I very quickly gave it all in to the guru, and
you gave your money to him?
Well, to the institution, things they were doing, finished paying off amount of attention, that kind of things.
No.
And
did that feel right to you to do?
Well, I did it wrongly. See, it was childish, with the way I did it.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes you have to learn lessons the hard way. So I learned, Beloved had made the distinction, you give of yourself, not empty yourself. And I learned the distinction by emptying myself.
You gave up everything.
I gave up everything.
Yeah.
And that's not how you do it. You give of yourself because you're in touch with fullness. You don't empty yourself because you have either a negative self-image or you think so much of that you can give it all. That's kind of childish.
Yeah.
And so I did it wrongly.
Okay.
In that sense.
So you're broke.
Broke.
Yeah.
I went from riches to pauper in 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a contrast.
Very much.
But you were in California.
I was in California.
And broke.
And broke. Had a job, and and then made good friends, and then but then that year was the beginning. The other fun thing was when I first came, I was like, it was called just the way of understanding then, and there was this new thing called the way of divine communion, but that was just for the weak-minded, obviously. And
You were going for the
way of understanding, of course.
Yeah.
And I looked around and nobody was wearing beads or dressing in white or bowing to pictures or anything bullshitty like that. And I went, way of understanding. You know, that's yeah. And then as soon as I got here, he started the devotional culture. And in 6 months, I was wearing beads, dressed in all white.
Oh no! What happened?
Well, he started the devotional culture.
Okay.
And so having prayers and all the stuff that I was saying, okay, I can do this because thank God there's none of these things here. And 6 months later, all those things were in place. I would have never come because I wouldn't have understood.
And you got into it
Well, no, I didn't.
gradually, or
Yes, yeah, too gradually, but I still was looking at him like askance every time, and I had dozens of sittings where miraculous things would be going on. It was just the brightest thing, and it was even better than being in nature. That's how I knew that it was true, because you go to some beautiful nature setting where you can jump in the water and enjoy the breeze and the birds, all the nature mysticisms that we can all easily enjoy in a beautiful setting. It was brighter than that. I didn't have any other spiritual visitations or anything. He still spoke and it was still brilliant, but my experience of him was still just brightness. There was just a brightness and a fire. Kind of my internal mind and thinking was kind of, when you get around him, you just kind of boil and bubble, and you could tell something was going on, and you could tell it was good stuff that was going on, and it was brighter than even being nature mysticism. Mm. So I was like that for a year and a half, and then he changed his name to Da, and for the Day of the Heart. And at that, one of those occasions that he came, I saw him as the divine person. The waves of his love joy just started bathing me in unfathomable sweetness. Wave after wave, he was coming as he came across the hill toward us all. I could literally see like ripples going across a pond, just waves coming out from him, and as they hit us, it just unspeakable sweetness. Just wave after wave, and I'm going, holy shit. And just every wave I relaxed more than any time in my life. And then there was another one, and the profundity of dissolving and utter baptismal sweetness was, then I realized who he was. He was a transmitting divine master.
Yeah, was he truly God?
Only God. That's when I changed from, he wasn't just that he was God, there was only God in his company after that.
Oh, that sounds different.
That's different. It wasn't, of course he was God. He's enlightened, right? And enlightenment makes that ecstatic, the exclamation of divinity. But then after that, when I would be with him, when it would become ecstatic like that, there would be only divinity, which even included me, so to speak, me, so to speak. But even I would be, it would be only divine everywhere. That's how I often said he's the only non-cultic person I've ever met. Mm. Cultism is a phenomenon the egos do. So every relationship has its cultic agreements. We agree to say certain things and we can't say certain things. And people who are adolescent or who are provocateurs, they'll think they're cool by saying things that provoke other people as if they're not part of a cult, right?
Yeah.
And but cultism is what egos do, and everybody has agreements with everybody else about what could be said or done,
and that is cultism?
That is cultism.
And there are agreements on what can be or cannot be said?
That's a cultism.
Because
cultism.
So when you became a devotee,
mm-hmm.
you did so formally.
Yes.
Then is it true that at that moment you are part of a community called Adidam?
Mm-hmm.
Then about Adidam,
mm-hmm.
there is a lot of people saying that is a cult.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you agree
Well, what's a cult? What's a cult? What do you mean about a cult? Cult is, on one level, cult is the foundation of culture. That's the positive side of it,
mm-hmm.
right? So And then the negative side of cultism is an exclusivity that's full of shit, as we know.
Yeah.
Well, I won't eat your food, or our food's better than your food. We won't eat your food. That's the negative cultism.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Muhammad had this great term called zana, and zana is what's translated as idle speculation. But if I said my God's better than your God because my God has 7 heads and your God only has 3 heads, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bullshit. That's zana. Idle speculation is a nice way of saying bullshit, you know. And so if you said your God is better than my God because my God has, that's cultism, and it's bullshit, or zana. And so if you make an exclusivity based on a childish need to be a part of something, that's negative cultism, even if it's in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
Even if, like, we're good Christians or Adidamers and we're going to help all our neighbors, even if you're doing good works, it's still cultic because it's we helping them because we're better, and we have the golden secret, and you don't.
Yeah.
So, so there's a negative cultism.
And you don't? Do you feel like that? Like we have something or someone special?
Well, we and have. I know that I have intimate access to radiance that is divine, and I can share it with anyone. It takes some study and some understanding and some vision. That can be easily or difficultly, is that a word, given.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I can help people have an access to that. But there's and I think that Da is the greatest of all those, and it's not just the my daddy's bigger than your daddy cultism version of it. In the history of religious and spiritual and philosophical thought, I think that it's the most critical, the most realistic, and that's how I see it in terms of as a philosophical or spiritual offering. For instance, if you go back, what could be considered the origin of religious realistic consideration would be the Upanishads. You know, prior to the Upanishads, Upanishads, depending on what part of the world you're in, all the religions were somewhat similar. There is God or a great force or something, and you're a sinner or an asshole or fallen from grace or born into karma or something like that. And if you only kiss Jesus' ass or say Nam Myoho Renge Kyo 10,000 times or give us a lot of money or some version of it, then you'll be saved, liberated, made to have a bigger wiener or make a lot of money or something, right? And that's idealism. Realism, first initiated by the Upanishads, has a different take. They say, consider yourself, come to critical self-understanding. All those other questions you have will be answered naturally, automatically, if you have a critical, realistic appreciation of yourself. And if you'll do that, and then they give a layered way of doing that, or a nuanced developmental spectrum of critical self-understanding, then you can enjoy. Then you won't be a sinner. You know, all those other idealistic formulas are obliterated in a natural ecstasy. So that was the first of that in the history of the world. Show me something in Scripture anywhere that is well defined, thoroughly realistic. Not that there's no realisms, no criticisms in all the other religions or mythologies. Yeah, they all have their little critical way of saying it, but here it's reduced to just the realistic. And then that's what Gautama Sakyamuni inherited. And then of course the Upanishads say, if you do this, then your little self will be transformed into the Para-Atman. Atman will become into Para-Atman, or the great self. And the Gautama came along and said, there's not even a self. So he extended that realistic, what would be called philosophy as opposed to religion, as if you want to make a difference. It's a realism as opposed to idealism is a better way of saying it. So he extended it even more. And then, and that really, in some sense, I mean, you had other great critical thinkers, Adi Shankara. He also was just understood. He's, of course, unified Hinduism and Buddhism, showing that they are not saying two different things, but there's a critical understanding whereby both are both understood as the same. But then Adida came along and extended it even further than the Buddha.
How?
Well, the Buddha would say understands desire, because self is
What?
desire.
Oh, desire.
Right? It's the teaching of self understanding through understanding desire.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but Adida said, where does the self come from? The self comes from the single action that can be read two different ways: the constriction or choking or contraction of feeling, which is read as the avoidance of relationship, back to our original avoiding relationship.
So was he saying that in Buddhism, that basically they make an error because they are assuming somebody who is desiring?
Well, Buddhism even penetrates that, but the philosophical or realistic assessment is even more critical or realistic. Critical and realism I use interchangeably.
Mm-hmm.
Than even Gautama's, because Gautama, the nirvana, where there would be no voice of self, when you understand desire, that is the natural realization. And Adida said, well, understand actually how it arises, not just desire would be the effect of it, but how does the self actually form? And it forms in
how the self arises in nothing.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And so I consider that the most brilliant insight in human history. And which, the word anxiety is Latin for to choke.
To choke, and then you say, like
Which
he said that was the choking from
choking your feeling, or constricting your feeling, or contracting your feeling, which is then manifested or seen or felt or happens in the field of relations. So you withdraw from others, sometimes explicitly or angrily, or sadly or fearfully, but it's a universal irresponsibility.
Mm. It's an irresponsibility?
Yeah.
That's like a big statement.
Well,
for a world where everybody by default feels like a self.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So he said that is irresponsible.
Well, because what is responsive? It's not responsive. You are then acting in reaction to what you have inherited. So it's better to be responsive rather than reactive. That's called responsibility.
Oh.
Ding, 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 ding. So responsibility, it's a real word. People use them interchangeably. How do you react to that? How do you respond to that? They use them, but there's actually two different words.
Okay.
One is already having been born, having the mother, your father, your culture, but I did it because I said it because it was my way I was brought up. That's reactive. It's the drama of the theater of your birth. But to understand that and then be responsive instead of reactive.
Yeah, because
that's responsibility.
Because this sounds like a rather huge assignment. I mean, how can you start observing the self arising in nothing if you feel totally like you are a person?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you start?
Well, in relationship is a good way to start. You want to love. There's a natural impulse to love and be loved, and to feel how we fail at that is a natural growth.
And is that where we can observe the self arising, or can we there observe how hard it is
this is not an insight that then you go and then you're free. It's as they say in the traditions, it's a tapas, it's a fire, it's a purification, and so it will take decades to people that are suddenly enlightened. It's bullshit. There's no insight that suddenly frees you. Yes, there are insights that instantly free you, but then you have to persist in that. You have to do the work of being responsive rather than reactive.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a fire. And that fire is what he calls the second form of the guru. The first form of the guru is to see someone who is actually free, who is actually always responsive, never reactive. And the guru, or as Socrates or Socrates would say, the daylight man, who does not live in the cave of subjectivity, who stands outside the cave in light, enlightened. They are responsive, and you see, Holy Mother of God, to coin a phrase, that person's different. They operate on a different premise of 100% responsive, 100% responsible, always in love.
So is that is that what a guru does? He is always responsive?
Yes, and responsible.
And serving?
Always.
Others?
Always. Yes, of course, that's what the daylight man does to the cave dwellers. You know, and what is everybody knows the Plato's or Socrates' cave, right? To review, there's Socrates describes, or Socrates describes there's a cave, and on the wall people just see the shadows, and they're chained, so they only see the shadows, they can't turn around, right? And so they are the mythic people who just see the broad outlines of but they think that's real. You grow up all the time and you think Santa Claus is real, Santa Claus is real. You see the black and white broad stroke outlines of your existence, and you think that's real. Of course you do, right? But then there was a smaller group of people in that parable who sat by a fire. The fire of rationality, the fire of logical understanding. And they saw that those shadows on the wall were just projections from the fire, across the light of the fire were making the light, making images, outlines. And they were sure that what they saw while awake by the fire, logically, that was reality, right? And so you have the mythic who, and they were also chained to only see the fire and that. So you have, in that time, you have, and most times, you have two classes or developmental phases of human existence. You have the mythic, magical and mythic minded, and then you have the logical. But that's the cave of subjectivity. That's the cave. The cave is subjectivity. You know that sensation you have of, I'm inside looking out of my eyes, I'm behind my eyes looking out. What's my favorite Who song? Oh, Behind Blue Eyes. No one knows what it's like to be the bad man, to be the sad man behind blue eyes. But when my fist clenches, cut it open. One of my favorite Who songs. But the cave of subjectivity is the logical and the mythic point of view. Well, my point of view, that's the cave.
Okay, so even those who were seeing that the fire was causing
they're also in the cave.
Okay, they're also in the cave.
The logical is also in the cave, and it's and the humility of that is, well, in my humble opinion, that's still cave. That is still, logic is still in the cave. It's superior, no doubt about it, to the mythic, no doubt about it. But it's still in the cave, as evidenced by people going, well, in my opinion, they might as well say, from my point of the cave.
So it's not free. Both are not free.
Both are not free. Both are not standing in real light. It's constructed light. And but there was another person in that in Plato's or Socrates' cave, the daylight man. And Socrates pointed out, what would happen if someone came from the daylight and shook you and said, "Hey, you're chained. What you're seeing is an illusion." What would they do to such a man or woman?
Probably not like him.
They would probably kill him. Yes, exactly. So we have a long human history of people who've come from the light, enlightened, the daylight man and daylight woman, and come into ordinary society and tell people to try to shake their chains. They're usually, well, you have three options. One is to ignore them. Well, they're just crazy, saying that there's like, ha, 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 go away. And they're saying that I'm an asshole. We got to get rid of this guy. Okay, so you either ignore them, you eliminate that voice.
Like kill?
Like kill. You've heard of crucified. They gave Socrates the immortal nectar.
The poison.
Exactly.
And Jesus?
They crucified him, right? So, and that's common. That's the most common response to the prophet who shakes the chains. And we have a long history of this. The way we deal with enlightened people is we can either ignore them, the kind people just ignore them, deflect, belittle, or we get rid of them. But the other and the least chosen alternative is to change the way you are.
Is that what Adida is calling for?
Absolutely. Change. If you will change from this to this, if you'll change from, well, in my humble opinion, to, oh my God, there's someone who is responsive all the time instead of reactive. Learn to be in light. Turn to respond to light. Respond to love's gift. And with doubt as keep your bullshit detector on high alert. But as long as you include yourself in that. So, because, well, if you read some of the scripture, you'll find out that Jesus was, he partied with tax collectors and whores and crazy. He turned over the bank tables in the temple. The guy's obviously nuts.
Yeah.
So if you think Jesus was a crazy man who was just partying with whores and tax collectors and was a nut turning over the temples, you think that's who he was? Great. Please go. Come back again some other time. And the same way, you can find out some of the confrontive play of Adida can be read in ways that can be conventionally presented in ways that are not socially acceptable. And so we kill those people or belittle them or ignore them or whatever.
Well, speaking of things that are not socially acceptable, there is also a lot of material online where they speak of Adida doing many things that are
awful.
Totally awful.
Oh, please look them all up.
But what do you say? Like
I was there. That's what I say.
Like what?
I was there.
Can you talk about some of the awful things that happened?
No, it's not worth it. It's like saying that Jesus was only a party animal, and it was just a madman turning over the temples. That's who. And guess what? Those are the facts. Well, the fact is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's who Jesus did that. That's the fact.
Yeah.
And you can find things like that Adida did. And like I said, I was there for many of those things that are out there now. Oh, he did this, he did that. It's hilarious, actually, sadly so, to see what was actually going on and what was reported.
Is there a difference?
Yeah, well, yeah. It's like it's like when you say Jesus partied with whores and tax collectors. He says, "You know what? You know what, Brutus, or whatever it is. I know you're a tax collector, but feel my power. Can you feel the love? Yes. Why don't you start not taking so much money and give half of that to those poor people? Okay."
That was what happened.
who cares? But I'm just saying that kind of stuff is what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was partying with the tax collector, and he converted in that heart to be a human and to give and to. That's what happened. He partied with the whores. Yeah, he kissed Mary Magdalene if you read the Gospel of Mary Magdalene or even the Gospel of Thomas. And then, but oh, what? A God man kissing another gender person? Yeah, he did that. And enlightened her heart, set her heart free for eternal love baptism. You have a problem with that? So, Adida did things that can be presented in, well, sometimes they're just plain old lies. And some of the stories were actual divorce, came out of divorce proceedings, where one couple in a divorce with children, both of them wanted custody. Well, if you still give me the kids, I'll say that Adida did this and that. And then it all settled, and they went, I'm sorry I said that about Adida. That's actually what happened. But what the scare sites want to tell you is, wait, this woman said that this, and this. Did they go on and explain that she actually denied she said that those were true, that she just used it in the divorce proceedings? No, they don't include that part.
Mm.
It was so, and I was at occasions where a woman threw herself on Adida. Oh, I love you, and then her husband said, "What did you do in there?" He jumped all over me and kissed me. And we were all going, what? What? It was actually the opposite.
Oh.
He was assaulted, not the other way around.
Okay.
So, and he had me he looked into my emotional sexual history better than I even knew about, and reminded me of things that I'd long since forgotten that were still troubling me, and brought them up in ways that were very confrontive and made me almost go crazy. I mean, I was to the verge of, I was about to have a psychic breakdown for days just because he would just keep me burning an issue of mine. Well, I could tell you, oh, he did this and he was mean and he said that and blah, blah, blah. And then once I understood what he was doing, I fell on my knees in eternal gratitude. And I was liberated forever. Never went back to that again.
Mm.
I was so that burning that he does with intimates can be presented in awful ways.
Yeah.
I could have said all kinds of awful things that he made me do. What a joke that just meant I hadn't understood what he was doing yet. And he doesn't care if you don't get it in the spot. Nobody gets it on the spot. It takes days, weeks, months, years, or lifetimes later to go, oh my God, I thank you. And in my case, one of the worst things that he did to me, it took me over 2 years to finally go, oh! And then I was walking and I fell on my knees on a sidewalk and I went, and my life was different from that moment forward. I changed utterly.
No, we don't want to share what that was?
Well, no, it was, but I changed from being a sexual premature ejaculator neurotic to being free.
Oh.
That's a big deal.
That sounds good. Yeah.
That was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I had always wanted to be free, and sexually, and I was liberated to be so by his fire. And he was, and everything that seemed so mean and harsh and too much was suddenly humorous, gracious, liberating. Mm-hmm. So when I understood what he was doing that was so offensive, and it sank to the depth of my psyche. I remember I went, I wouldn't have not let that not go into my deathbed. It would be after my last breath. That was the first thought I had. It would be after my last breath, this knot would have been released if it had not been for him. Uh-huh. And as it was, I was 33 years old and suddenly free instead of carrying it to my death. And that was a brutal fire, divine surgery. So, no, his genius is divine, no doubt about it.
Mm. So you said the guru is both a man and a fire?
Yeah, you know, in the Don Horst Testament, he talks about the 4 forms of the guru.
Uh-huh.
And you've seen that image of the horse. I don't know if you've sort of seen the image of the Don Horst, or the horse that's on the cover of the Don Horst Testament. Each of the hooves of the horse points to a different of one of the what he calls the hallowing or sacred signs of God.
Let's because what the image is that most people have of a guru is like a person, a physical person that, as you said, like you can come to and ask questions to, and
or sit in silence with, or
whatever.
But that's the first hoof of the horse.
But you're saying that there is more levels of guru-ness?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And so, thanks. So the first hoof of the Don horse points to the feet, or the actual body of the guru, as you say, someone that if you had a person you could go to and get a picture of and read his teachings that he wrote or whatever, see pictures or videos. That's the first form of the guru. And it's a very important one because we're human and we like human others to explain things to us.
Yeah.
It's not a computer program.
No.
And the second form of the guru, the second hoof points to a fire. And it's the fire of self-understanding. So when you start to see how you're always contracting or not loving or reacting instead of responding, that is a fire, or in Hinduism called tapas. It's a purifying divine fire. And
that is also...
That is the form of the guru.
Also guru.
Absolutely. It's the form of the guru, because the guru who is not reactive is responding to you, and in the face of, literally, someone who is loving, you see how you're not loving. Have you ever been around somebody who was way freer or way happier than you? At first it's like, oh, cool, yeah, woohoo. And then after a while you kind of feel how you're not as free, or you're not as happy, you're not as sexy, you're not as happy and loving as that person. And then that kind of burns.
Yeah, or you start to dislike the other person.
Yeah, well, that's what you do in reaction. But if you stay with them and see they're really just being happy or free, and you realize you're not quite as you would like to be free like that. Though that I would like, that's a fire.
Okay, so that's the second form.
That's the second form.
Okay, what's the third?
The fire at the edge of fire, when fire has done its transformative work, as it were, when the purification has worked sufficiently, at the edge of fire is light. And so the third form of the horse in the image is right at the edge of the fire and points to the heart. So the light of the heart becomes the third form of the guru. You feel the heart directly. And it's different than just being sentimental or romantic or I love bingo or baseball, or those aren't real love, as we call it in many philosophical traditions. Mm-hmm. But when there's real awakening to real self-transcending love, divine love even, the love of the beauty that is reality itself. When we love that appears at the edge of the purifying fire. That's the third form of the guru.
Okay.
And then the fourth form of the guru is it points to the transcendental star that is at the root and source and origin of all things, the light that makes all things, the transcendental light, the transcendental condition of all conditions. Every condition is a form of light. Even the primary laws of physics tells us that matter or energy cannot be created or destroyed, only changed. And there is a fundamental substance. We stand below the waves. Substance. Stand below. Substance. Be persons of substance. Stand below the waves. Stand below the changing forms. And then you stand in the primary condition of real reality, which is beauty itself, or love bliss. The Hindus have this term Satchitananda, right? Consciousness, love, bliss. And That is the when you become a person of substance and you stand below the changing forms, the waves, to push the metaphor, then you stand in depth. And that is and you first do that in standing in the heart. And then you come to the actual, that's the fourth form of the guru, the transcendental condition of all conditions. So, and in the human or bodily or avataric or given or descended form of the guru, the actual person, as we would say in conventional terms, you start to intuit all forms, all the other forms. And at first you might be offended. And that's how can he be God, me not God, blah, 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 right? That frustration. It's okay to be suspicious of the guru. In fact, it's required. Please doubt, but only if you also doubt yourself. It's okay to doubt someone who would say that, but if you also doubt yourself, then your doubt will have truth. So
that sounds all pretty deep.
No shit.
Yeah. Are you enlightened?
Well, everyone who comes into his company is enlightened. Absolute shit's no fucking way. But listen to me, cuss. Of course, I have been in his company to the point that all of this has been true. That I've been this. I have realized this. Every last light in form. Yes, absolutely. No doubt about it. Unequivocal. Every combination of all knowledge and experience and relations I've ever had do not amount to an hour in his company. When it's like that.
So, would you recommend people becoming like a devotee of Adida?
Well, first become a student. Devotee is when your heart responds. That's not something I could recommend. But I joined Ken Wilber in this regard, where he says his teaching is too brilliant to ignore. Everyone must be at least a student of the written teaching, and the later books are difficult, and they're written in an ego confrontive or offensive manner on purpose. But realize that it is a fiery confrontation, and yes, it's a Jogam Trungpa once said brilliantly, spiritual life better not start.
But you sound pretty happy about it.
But well, I have been served. And then he finished it up. It says, but having started, better to finish. Better not to start.
But if you do,
but if you start, it's better to finish. And so, no, the company of Adida is liberating, and when you recognize him, even for a second, even in simple admiration, even in gratitude for some of the penetrating insights, that is sufficient. That is sufficient to be grounded in appreciation, just a simple appreciation, and let that grow on its own. Then it's a matter of your urgency. If your urge is strong and you can go quickly into the fire, you will be pushed back. I'm reminded of the avatar Meher Baba. He was a very popular. He was the guy behind "Don't Worry, Be Happy" that the popular song came out of. But he was never spoke and blah blah blah. But he was very popular in Hollywood. When he was a young man in India, he wanted to be enlightened, and so he heard about this guru, on the classic mountain up the hill, and he had to climb into the mountain to see this guy. It was Upasani Baba, a wild guru. And Upasani Baba was, to me, it's a Far Side cartoon. He's sitting up there on the hill, and Upasani Baba, and Meher Baba's going up the hill to see meet the guru, and Upasani Baba looks over the edge and sees this young aspirant coming up, and he picks up a rock and he throws it down the hill, hits Meher Baba right in the forehead, bloodies his face.
Ouch.
And Meher Baba kept coming up and bowed at his feet. He goes, "All right, you can stay."
It's tough love.
A tough love. And I always tell people that, because to approach Adida, you will get a rock in your face. Probably not literally or actually, but you have to be able to, like what Meher Baba did, recognize the egos don't come here. It's not something you're going to get and go off and be a shinier version of you. There's plenty of gurus that will do that for you. That's not this.
So what is it for? For who? Who is it for?
This is very esoteric. For those who need it. Nothing more needs to be said than that, really. And I'm also reminded of the Tibetan temples that often have wrathful deities.
Have what?
Wrathful deities, you know.
What is that?
You know, those wrathful deities all around the temple. And when you come, you'll see, oh, he's talking in weird script, or those are wrathful deities. And he'll go, I'm the only by me, and those are the wrathful deities. If you come to the temple and there's all kind of things going at you, and you run away, good. But if you look at them and go, wrathful deities, ooh, those are scary. Okay, what's next? It's a test, absolutely. Egos are not allowed, or as he likes to say, there is no ego in religion. You take out, he spells it R-I-L-L-N. If you take out E-G-O out of religion, there is no ego in real religion. And so the ego will be offended. So understand, and don't put down your doubt. Don't put down your bullshit detector, by no means. But as long as you include yourself in it and see reaction rather than response. If you can you say, oh, he said this. Well, it's not for everybody, or it's a hierarchy. Whatever you will be offended. This is guaranteed. So if you can see beyond the reactivity, the reaction, then you have a chance of being responsible and responsive. That's what lovers do. Lovers are responsive to each other. Sometimes we're reactive too, of course, but that's only because we're still growing up. But lovers are responsive. As he says, the true man or woman relates to the process of experiences to a lover. Such a one does not enter into the realms of experience in a defensive manner, cranky, rigid, full of self and knowledge. Rather, one enters into each moment of experience as an act of love. Lovers do not fear dissolution. Therefore, they are active as submission, freedom, feeling, and ecstatic awe. Unlike the knower, who does not make love, but at best presumes to love, the lovers of the real are involved in ecstatic communion. So, in some sense, it is the way of lovers, and there's many, many, many corollaries to lovers, to romantic love. Now, take the romantic love and enlighten it, so that there is no other and no sentiment, but responsive love. And he is present and available via images and teaching and devotees.
Mm-hmm.
So
suppose somebody.
Let's just suppose.
Suppose somebody who watches this is like, oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
What?
If it's just interesting, find something else.
But it could be that somebody is like open and says like, what
Yeah.
can I should I read something? Should I
Sure.
go somewhere? Like, what would you recommend?
Oh. Well, I think The Knee of Listening.
That's a book, right?
That's a book. His first book, an autobiography. His first talks were called My Bright Word. The old name was The Method of the Siddhas. I would start with those, and they're simpler. And the later script is difficult for beginners. He uses a lot of capitalizations and parentheticals and long run-on sentences. It's a created script that is offensive to the egoic mind, intentionally so. And it's very difficult to read until you're already understand something about yourself and recognize something about him. Then there's a nectar or a sweetness or a heart joy that is extreme in those later books. But they're very difficult to do. Some people would just pick them up and just go, "Oh yeah, this is the greatest thing in the world." I wasn't like that. I'd have been offended. And in the same way that I was not. A lot of people go, they see a picture of him and go, "Oh, he's the enlightened one." I didn't. I read it for 2 years, then I lived in his community for a year and a half, and I was still going, "Well, I don't know about this guy." Yeah, it's pretty cool, but so I would, as a narcissist, I think that everybody's like me. It's going to take them a while, but so it may, but. So it depends, but I would read the early books first.
Okay, very well.
There's a series, My Bright Word, My Bright Side, My Bright Form. All those are really great introductory books, along with The Knee of Listening.
Yeah, I like that one, The Knee of Listening.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you want to hear some Leelas are stories of times with the beloved in person. I have a book on Amazon. It's called A Monkey's Tale on the Divine Person by Marrero. If you not Google, but in the search bar of Amazon, A Monkey's Tale, you have to put my last name in it. Those are my stories of a time I got to spend almost 5 months in a tiny room with him for about 10 hours a day. And I was a fool, and I had about as much self-knowledge as a juvenile Irish setter. In other words, none at all. And so he had a lot of fun with me, trying to teach me the basics. And so it's also a good introductory book too, because I was as much of a beginner and a fool as you could imagine. And he was very patient and ferocious and gracious and humorous with me. So that's a book of Leelas. He also recommends that we listen to stories of his play.
Okay, very well. I'm going to see if there is anything that... Any questions? People, now is your occasion. Sean says, love hearing you talk. Likes the song that you mentioned.
I saw that do that 3 times.
Sean also got his chains shaken at 33. Says Jesus also learned from teachers in India. They don't really talk about that. He would have kissed Mary. I would have kissed Mary.
Yeah.
Totally.
Only a damn fool wouldn't go. Thanks, everyone. They're very blessings.
Hanumanji. Behind blue eyes, that was.
Mm-hmm. No real questions?
No questions. Levels. What does that mean? Levels. Do you know that word?
Levels? Well, there are states.
Several levels. Or maybe it's like love.
Oh, love is. Yes, love is.
Well, I think we can wrap it up.
Good.
Okay. Thanks so much for sharing your story
Well,
with the internet.
gladly. Nothing I'd rather do than share as he says, the primary urge of a free person is to share.
Mm-hmm.
And he has liberated me in many ways. And I grow in my half-assed way steadily.
Okay. Then thank you for watching, and until the next one.
Da. Praise the great one. Adi da. Da. Beloved.